It's the SDG podcast. Today we're here with our podcasters. We got Peter Lawrence. Say hello, Peter.
Hi. Hi there.
Got Chad Juttner.
Hello.
And I'm Kyle Bacher. And today we're going to talk about why cloud and why not cloud.
Why cloud?
And I don't want to get into specific, like down to the app level, down to the tool, whatever. But just in general, why and why not?
All right. Now, we were talking just a tiny bit before we started recording, and I'm going to say this again. One of the best benefits of being in the cloud as an IT fella, right, is the inherent day off you get when there is a when there's an AWS problem. Man, that's like a vacation day for us. Is AWS down? Then so am I, man. I'll see you when let me know when it's back up. Right. And everybody just gets that now, right? Like AWS is down. All right, well, we'll refresh the AWS status page all day, and I'll call you if there's
And it's funny because I mean, back in the day, when it was first coming online, people were like just astounded that you can't make things better. I thought we were clouded because it would all be magic, and nowadays Cloudflare goes out or some other giant service. Everybody's like, oh, it's just down today for now.
Yeah.
Those people are working on it. They keep it up 99.9. That's good enough.
Early on, there was a lot of resistance to cloud. And one of the fears for IT people was we're going to lose our jobs. Like They're not going to need us anymore because we're going to go cloud.
Right.
And
I won't spend all my days building servers. I will just be nothing. I'll be laid off.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody would be listening to this that wasn't familiar with cloud and understands that it just means you don't have the servers in your closet. You're paying someone to use the servers in their closet or in their gigantic data center.
At this point, I mean, the NFL and MLB are advertising AWS during their games now. So I feel like it's penetrated past tech nerds and into the general zeitgeist.
So Chad, how do you decide which shows are the indicator? Which is it? NFL the indicator for the mainstream everybody, or is it more like Cheers or The Office, something like that? Is that where you get?
I'll tell you what, if Cliff Clavin made an AWS joke right now, that would be phenomenal, right? How great would that if Norm walks into Cheers, everybody says Norm, and then he makes an AWS crack.
Yep,
how you
got
doing,
the day
Norm?
off.
Better than AWS.
I think they're really targeting the decision makers in the business,
right?
With those ads, they're creating brand familiarity. And it's not as much the IT people, but it's the people writing the checks. They want them to think, oh, yeah, I know what this is.
I've heard that. I've heard those 3 letters before on my other 3 letters, so it must be good.
If my dad can tell me what the cloud is, that's my metric for this stuff. My dad is the kind of guy where if my dad works for the bus company, and you go and you hang out with them, and like we went to lunch. He goes, "Hang on a second, I gotta log off my computer." So he literally reaches around the back, pulls the plug out, and says, "Okay, let's go." That's his idea of logging off. So guy
pulls the plug out.
Yeah, that's how he logs off. And
a network cable, right?
He logs off. I mean, you are no longer logged in at that point. But if that guy understands what the cloud is, I think it's penetrated.
We're mainstream for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, if they've advertised Bonanza at Okay, go ahead, Kyle. I'm sorry.
No, I just think about like the early days and all the objections and kind of it's for government, there was regulatory things where it wasn't ready for and there's a lot of security concerns and things like that. I think for back then, I think it made a lot of sense for smaller organizations that couldn't afford an IT department.
Right.
And they couldn't otherwise they have to pay outside people to install hardware,
sort of like
in their
SDG.
closet. Yeah.
But
exactly. Well, it's just for like Exchange Online, right there.
I was going to say we've been cloud email for, I don't even remember how many years it's been, but
it's nearing 10 years.
Right.
Since we migrated
for the one provider, and then there was a couple of years for the other provider before that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So
but there's a couple of different aspects of that too, right? Like you're talking about software as a service, email and all of that stuff, and then but just having cloud infrastructure, having EC2 instances. I'm an AWS guy. I know more about that than I do Azure.
So virtual servers in the cloud.
Yeah, like being able to build and deploy and all of that stuff in the cloud is kind of, when I think about the cloud, that's where my head's at, right? I think, yes, there's a software as a service aspect, having your email and having Teams and having all of that stuff in the cloud, great, phenomenal. But as a developer, as DevOps, as all of the other stuff, for me, it's just the actual infrastructure, having the nuts and bolts out there that you kind of just assemble, put together. Like you're not, to Peter's point, you're not requesting a server anymore that you have to install. You're not even writing, we're not even writing startup scripts anymore. Just things
you're
exist.
checking boxes, maybe, right?
Yeah. And that's, for me, that's the cloud. That's as an IT guy looking at it, that's the money melon right there. Is
how much overhead just vanished. When you're thinking about implementing a project with a new application that needs all of those components on hardware, configured, in place, and talking to each other.
Well, and I don't know that it just disappeared. It just became so much easier and on another side of the dotted line, right? Like, oh, I need this. I need a server. Okay, well, here's a checkbox. Now you have a server. Oh, wait, I was wrong. I need 10 servers because our app is super popular or busy or something. Okay, check. Now you have 10 servers, done.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about last time, when Zoom needed 1,000 servers.
Yeah.
They just went check, done.
Yep. You change a parameter in a config file now, and you've got infinite computing capacity.
Right.
Well, and just the integration capabilities. You think about all the software as a service. We've got a form hosted in Nintex that ties into SharePoint, which is Microsoft 365, and it's got to use an Azure Logic app so that we can get the data into our recruiting system.
Hey, Kyle.
So we've got like 4 different cloud service providers in the mix there.
Are there any
three different ones?
Are there any other blueprints you would like to provide to anybody that wants to potentially? Hey guys, here's how we're doing everything. I'm kidding. It's probably not a surprise to a lot of folks. You can describe these tech stacks to people and go kind of in depth. And people are just going to be like, well, yeah, no duh. That makes obvious sense,
I'm not, I'm not giving anything away. We're not giving away the store.
No.
Yeah, right. And that's so common. Even designing systems for clients now. It's working with other architects. It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this, and they're like, well, yeah, of course. Whereas, 10, 15 years ago, there would have been okay, so how are you gonna deploy that here? How are you gonna deploy that here? How are you gonna get this thing to talk to this thing? And now all of those questions are just assumptions that are almost never proven incorrect, right? Like,
you don't have to fill out the form to punch a hole in the firewall to get this server to talk to the world, or do this other infrastructure change to make these two things talk.
Yep, and even better, it's taken that administrative overhead and offloaded it, and now developers are doing all of that, right? That's the dream. That's the DevOps kind of an aspect of that DevOps pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Is we're all describing our infrastructure in YAML, right, or whatever. And I was trying to think of like, okay, what was the last project I did before all of this became mature, right? Like, I worked at other places in the past, and the last one, they had a data center. They had, they were renting racks from Rackspace. They were locally. We had what was our company locally in Minneapolis, St. Paul? It was Visi, right? Visi would throw some racks into some server capacity for you. Loved those guys, but man, it was a process. Okay, you got to order your stuff from Dell, and they'll ship it here, and then we'll plug it in for you, and then whatever. It's all
there was definitely and then there was like that co-administration challenge.
Yeah.
Where it's what are you doing on our server, and what are we doing on our server? Like, who's doing what?
Yeah.
And situations where hosting providers we were expecting them to be backing things up, and they were expecting us to have asked them to do that.
That's not a conversation you want to have. Yeah, backups, right? Who does backups anymore? Don't they just magically happen now?
Actually,
and then the truth is,
take a note for my current project, because
backups have become like storage, redundant storage durations. It's no longer.
Do you even need to back up anymore? Is it just the cloud's never going to die, or it's going to be? I mean,
when
the thing falls out of the
sky, you can't really rely completely on like replication and redundancy, because there's a chance that it'll spread a copy of a bad file all over the infrastructure, and it's going to fail over to a bad file. It's corrupt files might be an issue, where if that, it's not just something was deleted, but we have a backup of it. It got corrupted. But I think it depends on the importance of your data.
Well, and even that conversation is going away, right?
Yeah.
Even that conversation is like, well, we're hosting this data at 2 different data centers and 2 different, spheres of control of our provider, and if one goes down, it'll fail over, and it's probably they've got all the kinks worked out.
Yeah, there's so much magic that happens that you take for granted now, right? Just within and again, I'm an AWS guy. I'm intimately familiar with how they do things, and like the concept of availability zones within a data center itself handles all of that for you, and you just don't worry about it.
And you're right, Kyle. Before, if you didn't check that box and you found out the day after, you were like, okay.
That's the thing about cloud is it doesn't completely like remove administration.
Of course not. That's why everybody has jobs still.
It goes from server management to service management.
Right.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of different cost structures, and options and capabilities. And so, if you want something out of the system, you might have to pay more money for it.
Sure.
I think one of the things we should talk about is the fact that, IT folks are by their nature semi-neurotic anyway. Always about, hey, am I going to automate myself out of a job? Is my job going to be offshored? Is, if I do this too good, what am I going to do after that? Right. And one, we've all still got jobs. And 2, like, no to all of those things. There's never, it just does not seem like I was going to ask last time, with all of this free time that we all have now because of the cloud and because of all the assumptions that the cloud gives us and because of all of the work that it takes off of our hands, what are we doing?
It's just changed it. It just changed the work.
Yeah, they moved our cheese, and we're finding, we're doing, I think we are doing, like, we are genuinely doing more stuff. It is not I think it's kind of taken away a position in IT, right? Like the guy that's plugging in the servers, that entry level guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's doing something else now, but he's still doing something. He's, you know, there's still opportunities for folks like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah, we're not taking any more vacation because the cloud freed up hours and hours of free time for us. We're building.
We're not the Maytag repairman.
We're building things that we couldn't even imagine 10 years ago. We're doing things on websites, on cell phones, on other sources that we could have imagined maybe, but you know, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I need to get this site small enough so that somebody can see it on their watch and do interactive things with it. Right?
It's almost like if you can dream it, you can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that bar is going to keep on moving. I don't see us getting and I don't see any of the films really coming true where we're just sitting around in pools of gel and not really doing anything else, right?
Well, yeah, we're not going to be batteries.
No.
The other thing you know, the stability of the systems has gotten way better.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with these cloud service providers going, you know, oh, we have to support this now. oh man, you know, now as Microsoft can't just sell you the server software and then expect you to update it and configure it properly and deal with all the bugs and hiccups and have to put in support tickets and do all that stuff. It's like, now we have to do all that ourselves. We better tighten up the ship. We better
I wonder if
solve these problems.
Those pieces of software have gotten tremendously better just because people are eating their own dog food now.
Absolutely.
You know, like, oh, I have to put this out in a data center and make it talk to all these places.
You know, they started to feel a lot more direct pain and suffering from
probably
not just the IT folks, but the users themselves. Because now they can go out on the internet and tell the world about all their problems they've had with the system, and they can go to user voice and things like that. So, you know, and I think that a lot of these providers have really kind of stepped up to the plate. You know, look at what Teams what's happened with just the Teams application in the last year in response to the pandemic. Right. And response to competition in the marketplace.
Yep.
So just the number of videos you can show during your meeting, you know, that was a delighter for people. And so they didn't want to use Teams to start out with because it didn't have as many video feeds as Zoom had. And now they've caught up. But I think, you know, there's also a lot of streamlining I've seen going on and simplification of, you know, we don't have to make it this customizable. If you look at like just and I'm always going to talk about Office 365 and SharePoint because that's what I know. And so from a software as a service standpoint, SharePoint Online has gotten it's been simplified. You can't do as much. You don't have as much capability to customize. And I think that's by design. It's
right.
Because over the years, those customizations got people in trouble. And, you know, one thing that's kind of gone away is migrations.
Yeah.
Once you're in the cloud, you know, it's just always updating. There's no next big version you've got to get ready for and migrate to.
In the old days, you did, even in the cloud, right? When things were first going to the cloud, they would send out a notice. By the way, you are being updated on this date. Nowadays, it just happens.
Yeah, I like how they do that too. I remember, so with AWS, right? As AWS graduates hardware and rolls through hardware, you know, I remember having a box that was on an EC2 instance that had been running for, you know, 2 years, which for the cloud is insane. Nothing moves for 2 years. And the way they roll that out is kind of, I mean, it's again, obviously they're doing it this way, but at the same time, they just say, hey, just so you know, that whole thing is going away. So either, and if for that though, like the magic is like, all you have to do is restart your EC2 instance, and it'll be on different infrastructure. And that's
magic movement, right?
Yeah. And also, you know, like as far as the availability conversation goes, like it's not even a thing that is taken into account anymore, right? Like they've gotten so good at this that nobody's saying, even after AWS goes down, you know, somebody's like, wow, AWS went down, we should probably move all our stuff somewhere else. It's like, yeah, oh well, you know, they'll learn from it, they'll get better. It's not a reason to consider, oh, we should go to GCP. And if GCP goes down, nobody's like, ah, crap, if GCP went down, we should move somewhere else.
As much as the cloud has adapted to the users have adapted to the cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
And when stuff moves and changes on them and features change, they're not telling you about every one of those.
No.
And
I mean, there's a web page somewhere that says it, but nobody's
somewhere in their
looking for it.
documentation they've updated it. And you might get something in the message center saying it's happening, but it might not have a lot of detail. And you know, I had a training in Office 365, and the whole sharing interface changed between Tuesday when the first training happened and Wednesday when the second training happened.
Whoops.
And all of a sudden I'm, you know, and my documentation was written and screenshots were taken. And it just threw me off because I hadn't used the new one before. So I had to learn it in the moment.
And there's nobody to be mad at that point, right? Like there's not one IT guy that upgraded without telling it. I mean,
Carl went and did this again.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember being that guy where I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to update this really quick. And then, you know, a few people would call me in the morning. What'd you do? I'm like, yeah, it needed to be updated. I updated it. And he's like, it looks all different. Now when that happens, you're just like, all right, well.
I will say it is easier to listen to somebody be mad at somebody else than it is for somebody to be mad at me.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
I like the one meme, the Simpsons meme, old man yells at cloud, has a completely different context nowadays than it used to. I like having that. Because you can be mad at the cloud. You can be that old man shaking his fist, but.
And it's practically the same response, right? The cloud doesn't care anymore than it did when it was just a cloud. Yeah,
the response is shoulder shrug emoji. That's it. That's all you get. There's nobody, you can't be mad that, and that's kind of nice because now that behavior, or now that way of thinking is adapted for most people, like even what we do isn't as traumatic anymore. You know, when we make big changes, like, oh, it changed and we're deploying to the cloud. So, you know, this is just normal.
I will say my parents have some experience of things changing behind their back and not being very happy about it. But, you know, that they're of an age where the documentation could have been written in stone practically rather than in pixels on a screen because it didn't change that often.
In my dad's case, his world is going to change when they give him a laptop instead of a computer, because when he logs off, when he pulls the plug, it'll just switch to battery. That's going to change entirely how he logs off. He'll be like, I don't know, you know, what is logging off then? Slapping your laptop shut? I don't know.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Those things change.
One of my concerns is, because it's happening, is your cloud providers are using cloud providers. And so you have this like cascade of interdependencies. And then you also have just your compatibility with browsers, you know, across multiple browsers, and your compatibility with operating systems and things like that. So
that's the features that you're seeing right now, Kyle. I don't know that a lot of us are feeling that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the big changes that's coming is starting February 15th, of 2021, Apple will be blocking third-party domain calls.
Yep.
So if you have an app running on their OS or you're using Safari, and a lot of the cloud providers like Salesforce and Office 365, they have third parties that third-party application providers that tie into their platforms. So when you go to those pages, you're actually being redirected to another domain.
Yep.
So now you have an issue with how well are they working together, and how
your
willing
cloud
are they to
providers have to
flex and
talk better.
accommodate each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know about the Apple thing, but I was just Googling it while you were talking, and I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
So.
All of the security things that are coming because of all of the security problems that have happened are getting worse. And I mean, Flash is gone now, right? Officially gone forever.
Who's really
Silverlight
bummed about
died
that, though?
a few years ago.
I'm not saying anybody's bummed about it. I'm just saying that they were kind of the lead. They were the canary in the coal mine for security, right?
Yeah, that's true.
They were a problem early on because you could do a lot of things that you probably shouldn't have been able to do from inside the browser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which enabled cool things, but also enabled bad things.
Well, I hope in this new setup there's an allow list that we can add domains to versus just turning I know you'll be able to just turn it off and allow those again.
For a while.
But at some point, they might say no. You don't even have the option.
I mean, Chrome updates constantly, right? You blink and then there's a new version of Chrome on your PC without you even knowing it.
I've since October of last year, I've been trying to go full Firefox. Love it. Yep. Absolutely love it. But speaking of Chrome, how mad do we get when we're in a meeting, somebody's screen sharing, and you see the way Chrome tells you that you need to update is first it's like, hey, there's a little green icon upper right. Click on it and it'll update. And then if you wait like 3 days, it turns yellow, and then it turns red after a week.
Yeah.
And I used to get so mad when I'd see somebody with a little red. I'm like, how are you not seeing that? It's like it's my OCD, right? Like if I see something, if I see the green, I hit it right away. And if I see somebody else's green, I'm like, all right, they'll do it at the end of the day, and then I see a yellow, and then my eyes start to twitch. I'm like, would you just hit the thing?
I usually have a moment of confusion, because I have to zoom in and out of my browser frequently, and that little update button hides like the 3 dots you normally click on to do the zoom.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't even know that I've noticed the green button because I am constantly closing browsers all the time. I just tend to just like forget about what happened there. I don't have 400 tabs open, which, it's a lot of tabs for some people, but
yeah,
it just goes away, and now I've got one window again, and I'm all fresh.
I'm one to leave tabs open, and I realize like it's traumatic for me to close a browser and restart it. Thankfully now you can restore with all your tabs.
Sure.
But I am a huge tab guy, like almost constantly. And one other thing, I appreciate so much. Like I don't think I would have been a good IT person if I was my age 20 years ago doing IT work, because as I'm getting older, I'm pinching to Zoom so much more than I ever thought I would. That's like the first thing. I go to a website, Zoom, and then like I'm doing this all the time, every day. I apologize. That's way off topic, but man.
That's all right.
Somebody mentioned it. Zooming in.
We've got your walker ordered. Yep.
Yeah. Well.
So there might have been a lot more reason not to go to the cloud, back 10 years ago. Maybe it's just not ready. We don't trust it, things like that. And from a security standpoint, the way I look at it is if I'm maintaining the servers in a closet and trying to maintain the security, versus Microsoft and their whole building full of security people that do that for a living, maintaining it. What do you think is going to be better?
The only benefit you get is if you're small enough not to show up on somebody's evil list of servers to attack site, right?
What's the big concern with the cloud today, do you think? What's the I know we've had recent outages. There was a half-day outage with Slack that kind of put a damper on the day.
I don't even think it's I don't know that anybody is concerned anymore. Like, I think that there's a couple of the startup companies were early adapters, right? I have this app idea. I need a place to put it. Obviously, it's going to go in the cloud.
Right.
Once they cleared that regulatory hurdle, right, of, HIPAA data and government data and all of that stuff. Once Amazon said, once they found the very first healthcare company to take that leap and say, hey, it's okay, man. You can be in the cloud. Nothing's bad's going to happen. Yep. We'll invent all these new certifications, all of these new ways to assure you that your data is secure. Doing that for healthcare companies, making them feel safe, and those guys blazing a trail down there helped open it up to almost everything else. Because once you got healthcare records out there, everybody else feels pretty okay. Yeah. Both from a infrastructure as a service, cloud provider, and a software as a service, right? Like, once somebody like Health Partners, once they started doing stuff out in the cloud, everybody kind of thought, okay, if Health Partners is doing it, we're probably not, we're not doing anything crazy by going that same route. And then once they opened it up to, once Amazon came up with the GovCloud concept, right, where it was specific regions for government cloud infrastructure,
you had pretty much at the time, and what it started out with is you had dedicated servers on their racks. Yeah. So your cloud access was really, it was almost like co-hosting or whatever they call it.
Yeah. Once those once that broke through, I think the floodgates kind of opened. I mean, I spent the previous decade in a startup-ish kind of company, and it was obvious for us, right? Like, when we started 2010, AWS was still kind of new. They didn't have nearly the breadth of services they have now.
Right.
And we were building a software as a service product for use by healthcare companies potentially and other industries that have protected data. Once those guys, and so for us, once those guys realized that software as a service in the cloud, it was okay, and there's certain guarantees you can give them and certain certifications that you can put on them. That was huge for us. We started on Rackspace, which was already cloud-ish, cloud-esque, right? Not cloud like we know it today, but also not, hey, we're going to ship you servers from Dell and you're going to rack them for us and we're going to manage them after that.
Well, and apart from being co-located, right, that you didn't necessarily have a guarantee that you were on your own machine even, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, okay, so if I'm not on my own machine, how can that be any different than the cloud? And again, you're right. Once the certifications come through, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge difference.
Yeah. Nobody wants to blaze a trail. It's like that old thing, like nobody got fired for buying IBM. Well, nowadays, nobody's going to get fired for going to AWS. Right. Probably the opposite. You're probably going to get a nice little...
Now, from a development standpoint, what about the horror stories you hear about somebody fired something up in AWS or Azure and accidentally left it running over the weekend, and it was a test loop that was going through video, and all of a sudden it's huge resource usage, and you get a bill for $500,000.
I actually have experience with this because I did something similar, right? So
you were cataloging your CD collection?
Yeah, exactly. Abstractly, I had this process that would index right? It would take a database and it would dump it into a search engine, right? So, or it would dump it into Apache Solar. Super easy to visualize, right? So it dumps it into Solar cores. Well, that process of reading, re-indexing, bulk re-indexing that database on the type of EC2 instances we had took a little bit. So one night, I'm like, you know what? I'm curious. How long is it going to take if I get the biggest EC2 instance I possibly can for our account and run that process? And it took it was magic. It took a 6-hour process and did it in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Great. You know what? Sometimes you'll forget to turn that off.
Yeah.
and I was lucky. I had Amazon addressed that specific problem by sending you billing alerts. Like, hey, we've noticed some abnormal usage. You might want to take a look.
The virtual power button.
Yeah, and now they've got budgetary constraints in there. You can set up your own constraints for budgets. You can set up your own everything. So they've given you tools to allow you to not shoot yourself in the foot, but you can absolutely still shoot yourself in the foot.
But you have to set up those tools. There are actually other cloud providers that you can manage your instances through, that do all that for you. But there's you can set that up directly, but it does need to be configured. You have to set up a budget and things like that.
Yeah. I wonder, every single time that I've had a question, specifically with AWS, and in my experience, I mean, we were tiny in the AWS world, right? Sure. We were barely a speck in their universe. But we would, if I looked at a bill, I'm like, well, that's kind of goofy. And you ask them, they're so huge that they're just like, don't worry about it. We'll just erase that, that expense. Even if we actually use those compute resources, they are AWS, at least in my experience, I'm
guessing all of the services are so big that they've got enough redundancy that to be like, well, you didn't really change our usage for the whole site, so
it's not really costing us anything,
right?
And we're working at different scales. Even if you're working with a local, Star Tribune 100 company, even those scales probably aren't at the level of Netflix or even our favorite Zoom, right? The Zoom problem is probably advertising for AWS at this point instead of a drag on their resources.
Right. Are you over relying on their goodwill and good nature? What if they said, no, we're charging you for it?
Yeah,
I would imagine $500,000.
I would imagine that there is a point at which they do snap, but for average Joes, I think we are in they have been exceptionally reasonable.
It's not in their best interest to upset people and anger them. The people that developers, people setting up a developer sandbox.
Right.
That's a huge benefit to them because this is one more person that's going to learn how to use our stuff and then recommend it and use it for real.
Yeah.
We want to encourage that. So when that developer does mess up and spend an extra couple grand over the weekend they weren't intending to, it's better to forgive them. Otherwise, you get that reputation and scare people away from the platform.
Right. I mean, the first use is always free, right?
Yeah.
Where's that reference from, Peter? I'm not familiar with the phrase.
It's an old cloud saying that the first use of cloud is free. Goes way back.
Actually, that is literally true. Your first year is free. That is on AWS at least, and I think most of them have that.
Right.
Yeah, come on in, play around, see what you think.
They'll get you hooked, so to speak, on whatever.
I wonder where they got that from. If only we knew.
If only we knew.
Yeah.
So we're talking about cloud. I had an experience this this week that was a little bit more local to me, where my internet went down for a couple hours.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. That's
It's
one of
just,
the worst things that can happen to a human being now.
it is surprisingly shocking how much you miss it.
And right now you can't go to a coffee shop, right? Like that used to be my backup. Oh, internet's down.
I did ask if I could drive to the parking lot, like the library parking lot. They've got pretty good Wi-Fi here.
Yeah.
So that was on my list of like, all right, I'm going to take my laptop. I'm going to drive
Can
to
you
the
tether?
library.
Do you have the plan on your phone where you can tether?
You know, I'm one of those old cheap guys that don't have the unlimited tether. And
Hey, Peter, when you answer your phone, do you have to flip it open first, or do you?
no, it's a plain old block.
It's
candy.
not rotary. Okay.
It's not a candy bar.
Did you have to unhook it from your belt to show us?
No,
Okay. All right.
but it does ride on my belt normally. Yeah.
Okay.
Why?
All right.
Is that
Yeah.
a problem? Is that a sign of my
Nope.
age?
Absolutely not a problem. I am looking at belt clips for my iPhone right now, but I just wanted to know, like, it kind of places you age-wise, where you keep your phone. Yep, there you go. Right.
I've had this brand for 10 years. I've had this particular
So
belt
that
clip for 2 or 3 years. And
so you're saying that brand is tenured.
it's yeah, it will always be there.
Yeah. Don't shake your head, Kyle. That was a quality dad joke.
I can't go there.
That was a
total
quality
dad joke.
Oh.
Good stuff.
But with the cloud, I would still be in business, right? If my internet at my house goes down,
Yeah,
I
you're
can
not.
locate.
All your stuff is still running.
It's still going.
You didn't lose your server and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's all going. It just is going. And I didn't even think like, oh no, the rest of whoever I'm working with is going to be so bummed because, you know, the stuff that I was working on is gone. It's like, no, it's not gone. It's still there.
I do think you'll almost need to have a backup plan in place. You know, what am I going to do if this happens? If my internet goes out, you know, I think, you know, for me, it's I can tether on my phone, and at least, and there's a lot of things like apps I can use on my phone. You know, I can use the admin app. I can use other apps if I need to review something.
I currently live in the black hole of cellular coverage for the city.
Oh, okay.
You don't have good cell coverage there?
No,
Really?
really.
Huh.
Yeah, it's.
So for you, even like having a hotspot.
I will tell you this: the next
not
house I
gonna help.
buy, I will check the internet connection on my phone first.
Yeah.
And that will be a determining factor.
Wow.
I'm
I
lucky
can't
enough
even.
to have many towers nearby and to have fiber. So I have gigabit.
They did offer to install a tower in my backyard, but I wasn't sure how the infrastructure would go for that, and my neighbors probably wouldn't be super happy.
I don't have fiber yet. They did fiber to the curb.
Oh,
No, not to the curb. They did fiber to the demarc, right? So, but it's still copper. Is that what you got, Kyle? Is that
No, I've
They
got
just-
actual fiber
right into your
right in
into
my
your-
house.
Oh wow, that would be nice. I tried that, and it was no better. So we're still using Comcast, but the plan is eventually they will lay fiber from individual residences to the.
And since I went fiber, the only types of outages I've had are like when DNS, like CloudShare, Cloudflare, whatever that was, when those types of things happen.
Yeah.
General internet outages.
The only outage I usually have at home, and I said this earlier in Slack, is that my daughter will change if she gets mad at me, she'll change the Wi-Fi password to a bunch of emojis, and I'll be like, oh, would you stop it? So and then my internet goes out for.
haven't you wrested admin control from your local IT provider, daughter?
No. Because it's so funny when it happens, right? I mean, I could change the thing, but I think it's a cute way for her to punish me for
That's right.
whatever perceived.
You can deal with that. You don't want her to have to get creative and figure out a different punishment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Like this is fun. The alternatives, not.
Right.
I don't want to get into that.
As long as it doesn't happen while you're on, while you're working.
Right on. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it has, but yeah.
So, like my challenge is from the service management side. I mean, I don't really hit much from the developer side and support much on the developer side, but I do have to keep the lights on and deal with licensing and accounts and all that kind of stuff. And try to stay up on top of major changes across a number of different platforms.
Right.
It's a challenge. I have this constant flow of updates coming from all these different systems telling me what they're going to be changing. And it's like, which ones can I ignore? Which ones do I have to let everybody know about? Which ones do I have to plan for?
Yeah.
That can get kind of tedious.
That's changed in the last 5 years too, right? I mean, how many Windows updates are there now versus 5 years ago?
Oh, every week it seems like something is updating.
Or version updates, main versions.
It doesn't seem to be that many that frequently, because it was like, 95 ME
compared to 95, 98,
98
ME.
Every 2 years.
A lot faster than that.
Yeah, but now it's smaller updates more frequently, and they're not whole version updates, not even whole service packs. But there are major updates that come along. Otherwise, it's mostly them trying to stay on top of security stuff.
Always.
And I don't have it set up to prevent just secret reboots of my stuff. So I have had it. I've had it happen where I paused a Netflix movie and left it as my main window on my screen and went to bed. And then at 3 a.m, I start to hear voices in my living room, and I wake up and I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
I'm like, and I start listening to it, and I'm like, and then you hear sound effects, and then you could tell it's a show. There's not a car crashing in my living room.
Right. Well, Microsoft decided that it was time.
The first time that ever happened, it's happened a couple times, but the first time it happened, it scared the crap out of me.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's a modern problem.
Because it restarted, it reloaded the page because it remembers where you're at. It saves your whole
setup, and
and then it just puts it back after it boots up after the updates.
Right.
And it didn't, for some reason, it did not remember that show was paused.
You needed to power off like Chad's dad does.
Yeah,
that'll keep that from happening.
Try logging off, Kyle.
Yeah, log off like Chad's dad. It'll fix the problem.
Would have worked. In that case, it would have worked.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my dad is a technology trailblazer. He's got a lot of great ideas.
Awesome. All right, gentlemen, I think it's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
That was the SDG podcast. If you want to reach out to us, shoot us an email at thepodcasters@solutiondesign.com. Until next time, say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
So long, folks.
Goodbye.